The first time I heard about the lighthouse, it was described to me as a place that remembers. That was the word the old fisherman used. Not haunted, not cursed. He said it remembers. At the time, I thought he was just another coastal drunk spinning stories for company. Now, I understand what he meant, and I wish I didn't. The lighthouse sits on a knife of black rock that juts out into the North Atlantic, a place where the sea never seems calm, even on clear days. Waves hit the cliffs with the sound of distant cannon fire, day and night, without pause. It was built in the late 1800s after a cluster of shipwrecks claimed hundreds of lives in a single winter. Official records say it saved countless others, guiding ships safely through fog and storm. Official records do not mention what happened inside. I was sent there as a maritime archivist, tasked with cataloging old maintenance logs, keeper journals, and weather records before the site was turned into a museum. It was supposed to be routine. 3 days on site. Photograph documents, log them, leave. I remember being mildly annoyed when I learned I'd have to stay overnight. The mainland ferry didn't run every day, and the keeper's quarters were still considered habitable. I told myself it would be peaceful, isolated, quiet. I was wrong about the quiet. The ferry dropped me off just after noon. The lighthouse tower rose above me, white paint cracked and blistered by salt, its lantern room clouded with age. A low building clung to the rock nearby, the old keeper's quarters. The door creaked when I pushed it open, and the air inside smelled like dust, mildew, and something metallic underneath, like old blood that had soaked too deeply into wood to ever truly leave. And I unpacked my equipment and began work immediately, eager to keep my mind occupied. The documents were stored in a small room at the base of the tower, shelves sagging under the weight of ledgers bound in cracked leather. The earliest logs were meticulous, every oil refill, lens cleaning, and weather change recorded in neat handwriting. Over time, though, the entries grew stranger. One keeper wrote about hearing voices during storms, carried on the wind. Another described seeing lights on the water where no ships should be, lights that moved against the current. I chalked it up to isolation and stress. Lighthouse keepers were known to go a little mad. Still, as the afternoon wore on, I became aware of a sound I couldn't quite place. It was a low, rhythmic noise, almost like breathing, coming from somewhere in the tower. I paused, holding my breath to listen. The sound continued, slow and deep. I told myself it was the wind moving through cracks in the stone, or the sea echoing up the stairwell. Even so, I found myself glancing toward the spiral staircase more often than necessary. By sunset, the sky had turned a bruised purple, clouds rolling in from the horizon. I decided to stop for the day. The quarters had electricity, powered by a small generator, and the yellow light felt thin and weak against the gathering dark. I made a simple meal and sat at the small table, the sound of waves pounding below like a relentless heartbeat. That was when the light came on. I hadn't touched the controls. The lighthouse was no longer active, its beacon decommissioned years ago. And yet, through the window, I saw the sky flare white as the lamp ignited. The beam swept across the sea in a slow, deliberate arc, illuminating the water in stark flashes. I rushed outside, cold wind tearing at my jacket, and stared up at the tower. The light rotated smoothly, exactly as it would have a century ago. My first thought was that someone was playing a prank. My second thought was that I was not alone on that rock. I shouted, my voice nearly lost to the wind. There was no response. The beam continued its endless sweep, uncaring. I went back inside and locked the door, my heart hammering. I tried to call the mainland, but my phone had no signal. The radio crackled with static. The generator hummed steadily, indifferent to my fear. Sleep was impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard footsteps on the stairs, slow and heavy, circling the tower. Sometime after midnight, I heard a knock on the door. It was soft at first, almost polite. I sat frozen on the edge of the bed, staring at the door. The knock came again, louder this time, followed by a sound that made my stomach twist. Someone was whispering my name. I had never told anyone I'd be there. My name was not written anywhere on the lighthouse. And yet, the voice outside spoke it clearly, with the familiarity of an old friend. I didn't answer. The whispering continued, words blurring together, rising and falling like the sea. After what felt like hours, it stopped. I waited until dawn, gripping a flashlight like a weapon. When morning came, the light was off. The tower stood silent and inert, as if nothing had happened. I tried to convince myself it had all been a nightmare. Daylight has a way of shrinking fear, making it seem foolish. I returned to my work, determined to finish quickly and leave. That was when I found the last journal that IT was hidden behind a loose stone in the wall, wrapped in oilcloth. The date on the first page was 1912. The handwriting was cramped, frantic, as if the writer had been racing against time. That he wrote about a storm unlike any other, a black wall of water and wind that swallowed ships whole. He wrote about the light failing, the mechanism freezing no matter how much oil he poured into it. And then he wrote about the knocking. According to the journal, the knocking began during the storm, loud enough to shake the tower. The keeper believed survivors from a wreck were trying to get in. He ran to the door, ready to help. But when he opened it, there was no one there. Only the sea, surging impossibly high, and something moving beneath its surface. The keeper wrote that the knocking continued every night after that the voices learned his name, that they begged him to turn the light back on. He resisted for days, convinced that whatever was out there was not human. But the guilt wore him down. He turned the light on one last time. The final entry was short. The sea has given me back everything it took. They are coming up the stairs now. I can hear them breathing. There was no official record of his death. The journal ended there. As I closed the book, the air around me seemed to grow heavier. The low, rhythmic sound returned, louder now. Breathing, coming from the stairwell. I backed away slowly, my pulse roaring in my ears. The sound of wet footsteps echoed against stone, each step deliberate, patient. I smelled salt and rot, the stink of the ocean floor. The light came on again. This time, I didn't run. I stood frozen as shapes emerged from the darkness of the stairwell. They were vaguely human, their bodies bloated and twisted, skin pale and translucent, eyes clouded like dead fish. Seaweed tangled in their hair, and water poured from their mouths as they breathed. They spoke in unison. My name carried on voices ruined by drowning. They told me they had been lost, that the light had guided them once, that it could do so again. I don't remember screaming, but my throat burned afterward. Somehow, I made it past them, out the door, into the screaming wind. The beam swept across the sea, and for a moment, I saw it clearly. Hundreds of shapes beneath the surface, all moving toward the light. I threw myself down the path to the dock, slipping on wet stone, lungs on fire. Behind me, the lighthouse glowed brighter than I had ever seen, a beacon not of safety, but of hunger. I don't know how long I floated before the fishing boat found me. I was delirious, half frozen, babbling about lights and voices. The crew said the lighthouse was dark when they arrived, silent and empty. They told me later that I had been found clutching an old leather-bound book. The authorities dismissed my story. Exposure, hallucinations, trauma. They sealed the lighthouse permanently and marked the incident as an accident. But sometimes, late at night, when fog rolls in thick and low, I see a light out on the horizon where no lighthouse should be. And I hear knocking, faint but insistent, echoing in my dreams. The sea remembers, and it is still waiting.